There we go.
Once we got
So we can continue on and with our next lesson. And this is a fun one. If I were to ask you what you think of when you think of a shepherd, what do you think the shepherd is carrying?
staff.
Yeah.
Right? I've been in church like my whole life, and I've been in more than my share of little Christmas musicals or Christmas enactments. And every time there's a shepherd, and the shepherd is always carrying one thing.
Staff.
His staff.
Big stick.
Yeah. And that's great. Like, that's awesome, because that's what we think. When I see that picture, I think that's a shepherd's staff. That's a shepherd's tool. Well, that's fine. But the next scripture we have, it says, you are with me, from the last one. And then it says, your rod and staff, they comfort me. So we're comforted because he's with us, but with him is the rod and the staff. And we know about the staff, or at least we think we do, but then we kind of skip over the other one. So that picture there is a staff, and this picture is a rod. Now, we don't use that word anymore, hardly, but the Bible does. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And I still remember this in King James, so I still say the King James one. But let's look at these, each of these, and how they're comforting. So the first thing we have to realize is the shepherd spends his entire life with the sheep. He goes up the mountain to prepare. He goes with the sheep, but he's always with the sheep. So if you're living out with the sheep, you probably don't want to carry a lot of stuff with you, right? I mean, he's not pulling a little red wagon with all of his, his TV and his tent and his, all of his cooking utensils and things. No, he's just traveling really light because he walks everywhere. And so a shepherd would travel extremely light. They would carry some food for themselves. They would carry some medical ointments for the sheep, and they would carry a rod and a staff. And every shepherd, every good shepherd, would have a rod and a staff. Now, I want us to remember as we talk about these are comforting things. These are comforting things. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And again, we talked last lesson about him being with us, and with him is always the rod and the staff. So let's talk about the rod. A better word that we use would be a club. It would be a club. And I have it on a good authority that the Old Testament shepherds would spend their lifetime mastering the use of a club. And I've actually read stories about shepherds in Africa that could take their club and throw it and hit a very tiny area on a target. That's what they would use it for, and they would spend their lives with that in their hands. So what did they carry a rod for? Well, it served three major purposes that are all very important to the shepherd. The first one is as a weapon to defend themselves. So I showed you that nice picture of the bobcat. The bobcat's waiting, and then he jumps down at the shepherd to get himself a sheep. What does a shepherd do? Well, he has this club, and he can launch the club. He can throw it with deadly accuracy, or he can swing it, and he can hit things. And if you remember, I believe it was David who said he killed a bear. I would imagine he probably had a club that he used when he did that. And it says with his bare hands, well, the club was a tool in your hand. So anyway, they would use it to defend themselves. They would use it to ward off things, predators and things like that. And so it wasn't a weapon like they would go attack people with it, but they would keep it as a weapon to defend themselves and certainly their sheep. And I don't know about you, but if I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death and a bear jumps out, I want the biggest club that I can find, preferably one like with ammo in it, and lots of ammo in it, because bears are scary. Well, the good shepherd would carry it, and he would use it as a weapon, but he would also use it as a corrective tool for the sheep. All right, so I just said that. A corrective tool for the sheep. What did you think of when I said that?
My parents' belt.
Ah, there you go. Okay. And what did your parents do with the belt? Did they just show it to you?
They brandished it before they used it.
Right. Well, they used it though. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
So just showing somebody a belt doesn't do anything. Although when my son was little, he had a wooden spoon, and we'd say, you know, we're gonna get a spoon, and he knew what that meant. So, but what I don't want you to hear is that the shepherd is beating the tar out of his sheep. Okay, a club can beat someone to death. It can be used for that. But the shepherd does not want to hurt his sheep. He wants to correct his sheep. When a parent spanks their child, if anyone still does that, theoretically, of course, then they're doing it because they love the child and they want to correct the child, right? Because we want the child to grow up knowing that's not the right behavior. And so we try to modify behavior, right? Or now we use timeouts or other things like that. My favorite is the counting system. It drives me absolutely nuts because I'm in Walmart. I hear a mom go, I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to whoop you. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 5/8, 2 10/16, and then I'm like over there going 3. Let me beat the kid for you. Like, now I don't mind. You know, I don't beat children, but if the child knows there's no consequence, then it isn't really a corrective tool. So here, the shepherd uses this as a corrective tool. So he can actually, he can thump the sheep like you would with a belt or a spoon or your hand to a child and let them know that wasn't good. So if they start to wander astray and you're close, you can pop them, right? But keep in mind, a club is only a few feet, okay? So they have to be within a few feet of the shepherd for him to reach out his arm to correct them. So,
Jeremy,
yes.
Jeremy, could I add something here?
Absolutely.
I read a book, and I think the title of it was A Shepherd's View of the 23rd Psalms. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or read it. Very good book.
What this class is based on.
Pardon me, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So then you know that in this book, he talks about this rod, and he says it is, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
And he talks about the rod, that the shepherd himself makes the rod and makes it out of the root of a tree. He makes that rod to be balanced so that he is able to use it well, to club or to use it, you know, to throw. And he also mentioned in that book that one of the things, the way he corrected the sheep, is that he threw that rod so that it would whiz past the sheep's head to cause the sheep to pay attention.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was so interesting. We oftentimes think of it only as something that you would strike the sheep with.
Correct.
But it wasn't. It was to warn the sheep or to get their attention.
Absolutely.
Pay attention, you're going the wrong way.
Yep.
And then to bring the sheep back.
Awesome. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And Tricia popped in on chat. This is a great point to go along with that. She said if the shepherd would be too aggressive, it would cause a panic in the flock and then affecting more sheep. So accuracy had to be important. And that's exactly right. If he threw that and it scared everybody and they all went, you know, haywire, that would be good. So he needed to have that accuracy and that. So absolutely, we think of it as, the first thing we think of is a tool to beat somebody with.
Right.
But the shepherd didn't want to beat his sheep. He wanted to correct them. And so thank you for bringing that out. That's actually, when I read that book, I got so excited by that book that I started studying all of that. And then I wrote this class. And so a lot of it is because he inspired me with that. Great little book, by the way.
It really is good. He
If
also said that they use, maybe this is your next thing. So if it is, I'll just be quiet. But he also used the rod to check the sheep.
Yep. That is next.
Is that okay? So I'll be quiet. I don't want to
No, that's awesome. As a means to inspect the sheep, and this, we don't often think about a rod used this way, But if you think about a sheep, and by the way, yeah, several of the stories that I say I read in that book. So if you want to get that book, it's called The Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a tiny little book, pretty quick read, but it covers a lot of this stuff.
It's really good.
His story is better than I can tell because he's an actual shepherd and I'm not. So anyway, they would inspect the sheep with it. So if he's got a sheep that he thinks has a parasite or something, or maybe a wound, then he has to move that wool. And so he'll use that club and he'll move the wool around and he'll kind of rub the area to see if it's tender. And he can basically just check the sheep, inspect the sheep with this club. And so he uses it for all of that. And the rod was considered to be an extension of the shepherd's hand. It's always in his hand and it's always at the ready. And so I'm assuming it would be in his dominant hand. So if he's right-handed, it's in his right hand, and he's always ready to defend, to correct, to inspect, or to love the sheep, or to throw it for danger, or to get their attention. That's what the rod is for. And again, I want us to remember, thy rod and thy staff, they what?
Comfort.
They comfort me. So the fact that he has a weapon and a tool that he can thump me with comforts me. Isn't that beautiful? Like he can actually make me comfortable when I see that. It's kind of like, when you're a little kid and you're walking with your dad and you see the bully from school. Man, that bully can't do anything to me because I'm with my dad, right? My dad is like, man, he's here and he's big and he's gonna, scare away the bully. Well, that's what the shepherd does. His presence is there and it brings comfort to the sheep. So the rod, by the way, is a symbol for authority, power, and discipline in the Bible, and it was also used for defense against danger. And so we can remember that. Real quickly, before we move off of the rod, I just want to share another scripture that maybe you thought of, maybe you didn't. Proverbs 13:24 says, spare the rod,
Spoil the child.
spare the rod and spoil the child. And if I had $1 for every person I know quoted that just to tell me that they had to beat their child. That's not what it was for.
No.
But if you spare this rod and you don't correct them, or you don't protect them, or you don't inspect them and love them, then they will be spoiled. They will not turn out right. So spare the rod, spoil the child. I used to think that meant if you don't beat your kid enough, he's going to turn out wrong. But it actually means if you love your child enough, you're going to use the rod properly. And it's not ever to beat, except for enemies. You can beat enemies to death, that's fine. But it's not ever to harm the sheep. It's never intended to harm the sheep. And so we do well to remember that. So, okay. No, I really should stay on my note sheets. That would help. Anyway, so the rod is the symbol for authority, power, discipline, defense, and against danger, or defense against danger. So, and then, of course, Psalm 139 says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. So why do I read that? Search me, God. David was a shepherd. So when he says, search me, God, he says, use your rod to bring me close and to separate my fur, my wool, separate me from my views and show me what's not right in me. And I know when he wrote, search me, God, he was thinking of how he searched sheep to look for insect bites or snake bites or other things. And so that's what he's telling God, search me, God. And that's an intimate cry for closeness, for correction, and for that relationship. And I think that's an absolutely beautiful thought that just thrills me to no end, to think of God searching me that way. So many people see God as with a club ready to thump you, but that's not always the case.
Hey, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
The thing that occurs to me as far as the sheep is concerned is for a lot of these things that they're being searched, that rod's being used to search for, the sheep's not aware.
Right.
They know they're bothered, they know they're irritated or whatever, but they're not aware what it is.
Absolutely.
So they can't even tell. And I think we, as Christians, even, I mean, we have those things that we're not really aware of. We know we're irritated, but we don't know what really is the cause. Some of us might think that, but we don't really know.
Absolutely.
God knows.
Absolutely. And you know, while you were talking about that, I thought of how every time I'd go in the woods when I was young, when I would come in from the woods, we'd have to do a tick check.
Mhm.
You'd check the hair to make sure there were. I couldn't tell if there were ticks on me, but my mom knew that if there was a tick there later on, it would be a problem. So she would search to try to remove it now. And that's an awesome thought. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's how God is with us, searching us. We may not even know what it is that's causing it, and that's a great thought. So he's searching. So he's got the rod, and again, we always think of the shepherd's staff, but the rod is extremely important, and every good shepherd would have one. I usually teach this with my rod. I actually found a root and made my own rod when I started teaching this, but I didn't figure you'd want me waving it around while I was talking on a tiny screen. So, but it is kind of funny when you're in a new church and you're teaching this and you pull out this big rod and people are kind of like, uh-oh, is he going to start thumping the sheep or what's he doing? So.
Oh, that explains why I've seen people at St. Elmo flinch.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
No, we got too many people concealed carry here, so. So I don't worry about the rod. Oh, anyway, all right. So the rod is the extension of the shepherd's hand. They are one. It is part of the shepherd. And so when God disciplines us, it's because it's part of him and he loves us. And I already said that, but I didn't click. I get ahead of myself when I'm not looking at my note sheet and I don't give you your blanks there. So I'll give you a second because that's a lot of words that I covered there. So, by the way, just when you read through the Old Testament and you hear rod, think of this. Think of authority, discipline, power. It was a common symbol. Why did kings always carry a scepter? Because it's like a physical show of their strength, you know. And so it's been throughout history kind of a common symbol for that. So, okay, so let's move on and we'll consider the staff now. Holy cow. Yeah, I just realized what time it is. Mercy. So the staff, and I'm going to say the staff represents kindness, patience, comfort, and consolation. It's the most familiar symbol of a shepherd, and it's not like the rod. The rod is important, but it has a different function. The staff has much, much different of a function, and a wise shepherd will use that staff for several different things, and we'll go through them kind of quickly here. So the first thing he uses his staff for is to draw sheep into intimate relationships with each other.
Not the last word.
So, consolation?
That's it, Chief.
Oh, okay.
She got it now.
I got it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Okay, sorry, I tend to scroll fast sometimes. So if a sheep has a lamb, the lamb can't always find its way to the mother to drink its milk, and so the shepherd will use that hook to pull that sheep in close. If he touches it with his hands, it'll smell funny, and the mom sheep may not actually respond to it. And so he uses this staff to pull it close and pull it in very close so that they can be mother and sheep, I guess, mama or you and lamb or whatever, however you want to say that. So they need that relationship to survive. And so he'll use his staff to pull them in. I love that picture because it's one of fellowship for us. A lamb is placed with its mother to feed, so it's not rejected by its mother. Well, we need to be pulled into fellowship with one another. We need to be pulled close. And sometimes we need to be kind of pulled in with other people that maybe we don't always talk to at church or we don't necessarily, spend a lot of time with, but we can be placed together in fellowship. And that is a great thing to have. Now, number two, suppose that sheep needs to be inspected, but how are you going to catch it? because sometimes sheep are ornery and they run away. Well, that hook, you reach out and you can catch the sheep before it can run away, and then you can draw in that sheep close to you, and then you can inspect it with your club. So the staff and the club work together here, and the staff brings the sheep in close, and so you can inspect it. Or if the sheep starts wandering the wrong way, you can, if it's too far away, you can throw the club. But if he's close enough, you can reach out and hook him around the neck and just gently guide him back to where he needs to be, or she needs to be. So it's a help there to correct the sheep or guide the sheep. And so you guide them where you want them to go. And again, I want to make this clear. It's a gentle pressure that you put around the sheep, not beating the sheep, right? We always see like shows where they want the animal to go, so they beat it, right? And ask Balaam how that went. He beat his donkey, and then his donkey finally said, "Hey, dude, why are you beating me? I've been a good donkey to you all these times." And that's a great Old Testament story. But we don't have to conjure up the image that God is going to beat us into submission. He's guiding us. The shepherd is walking along with us, and he's guiding us with gentle pressure, just applied to the side of the sheep. So he can tap the sheep on the side of the belly, and it knows to go that way. Or he can tap the other side, and it'll turn. And so he uses it to direct his sheep. And then he uses it to touch his sheep to show favor. So like I have a cat. My cat comes in. As soon as I come home, she runs up and meows at me until I pet her. She wants me to show her favor, and so I pet her. Well, the shepherd can't necessarily always pet all the sheep, but as he's walking along, he can take that staff, which again is an extension of his arm, and just rub it on the sheep to let that sheep know he's still there. So maybe he sees that sheep is starting to get a little antsy as we head into the valley. He reaches out and says, "Hey, I'm still here." And that can calm the sheep down. And that can actually avoid a greater panic from all the other sheep by him just showing affection and love to that one sheep. And so he would use that. And I look at it like this, like we see best friends or kids used to do this. I don't know if they do so much anymore, but they walk along hand in hand. They're just holding hands. When I was in Cairo, Egypt, they have a thing where the men hold hands because they're friends. And so you just see all these grown men walking along holding hands. It's awesome because you're like, hey, this is really nice. It's nice to walk hand in hand with somebody, right? If you love them and you hold on to their hand, then you have that close relationship that's closer than if you're just not connected. And so he's basically, so to speak, walking hand in hand with a sheep. I realize sheep don't have hands, but he's walking with his sheep and touching them along the way to make them more comfortable. And then, of course, there's one more thing that the shepherd uses this for, to lean on and rest. It's also a tool for the shepherd. I can just imagine you're out there all the time, so you got to sleep when you can. And so you could stick that in the ground, lean up against it, and try to rest and maybe get a little sleep that way, or at least just lean on it. Like when I go hiking, I always carry a walking stick because I need to lean on it to bring myself up. So as he's leading through the valley, we need to be aware that he is doing that with us. And so he's using it that way. All right. So for me, these could represent the word and the spirit, the rod and the staff. The rod and the staff, they're always present and they're always ready to do whatever is needed to make the best sheep that they can be. And to me, God's word and his spirit are always there to make us the best sheep that we can be. Again, if you are one of the people who thinks that God is just waiting for you to do something wrong so he can beat you with a club, rethink that. Because God loves you. He's the shepherd. He doesn't want to beat the sheep. He doesn't want to hurt the sheep. He certainly doesn't want to kill the sheep. He wants to love the sheep and correct it and be close to it. And so that's why I believe God has given us the word and the Holy Spirit so that we have those things so that we can be the best sheep that we can be. So the shepherd is always there. And I go back to the valley of the shadow of death. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So his staff and his rod are what he uses. And when I see that staff and when I see that rod, I can be at ease because I know that my shepherd is with me. And so when we know the shepherd is with us and ready to help us, we know that we can live the best life possible. We can be at ease. We can be at peace. Sheep, by the way, often get themselves into situations that they can't get out of. And one is like thorns. They tend to go along in the thorns, and like the thorns just grab a hold of them and they can't get free, or they might fall in a hole, or they might get cast, like we talked about, fall on their back. And those are all situations out of their control. Yeah, they put themselves there possibly, but they're there in that situation. But the shepherd is always there to rescue. The shepherd is always there to lovingly, gently restore and bring back that sheep to the right place. And again, think of the 99 and the 1. We assume that the 1 is doing something wrong, right? That 1 represents that bad sheep, that maybe that sheep fell in a hole and we didn't notice. And maybe the sheep didn't do anything wrong at all, but it got left behind. So the shepherd is still loving all of us, but he's loving that one too, and he's going after that sheep to save it. So the shepherd is always there to rescue us. So what we have to do is simply learn to live in close intimacy with our shepherd. Man, he's always there. God is always right there. Jesus is always right there. We can ask his thoughts. We can ask him for advice. We can ask him for his guidance. We can tell him how we feel, even if it's not good. Share our frustration. Whatever it is, the shepherd is right there. And we can tell him that. And we can feel his touch of favor with his staff. And just know that when you feel that, it's him saying, I love you, sheep. I love you, sheep. I'm here with you, and I love you. And so he's right there with us. And so his rod and his staff, his power, his authority, his grace and patience are what comfort us. The rod and the staff, they comfort me. When I was little, I did not believe that the rod was comfortable. I never believed that the rod was for comforting. I thought the rod was just simply to beat my brother because he was always wrong. And he was the one that got the belt. I only got it once. I only got a belt once, and that was because my brother did something and wouldn't confess. So I not that I was a perfect child, but that is true. But anyway, so that is our shepherd. And again, we don't always understand why the rod and the staff would be comforting. But now when I see those pictures of that staff and that rod, I think of the fact that he's right there. And if I fall in a hole, he can pull me out with that staff. And if there's a bear, he can scare that bear away or kill that bear. And if another sheep is bothering me, he'll come over and poke that sheep with either the rod or the staff, and it'll leave me alone. And so the comfort is knowing that the shepherd's there. It's not that we're in the valley, because he can be in the valley with us. It's not that everything's perfect. We just know that wherever we are, we're okay, because the Lord is my shepherd and he leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. See how all these go together? So the Lord is my shepherd. I don't have to want, because he does all these things. His rod and his staff comfort me. I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to want for anything. He's going to provide. And so that's why I love this so much, because it speaks of a loving shepherd who truly, truly loves us. Okay, so God bless you. And we're going to stop there for tonight, and then we will continue on with next week.